we gather in search of the truth, dark, and mystery. It's the Drunk Turkey Show.
Big development today in the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. According to state and local officials and court documents, 28-year-old Brian Christopher Koberger has been arrested. He was arrested and arraigned this morning in Pennsylvania.
We have new details on what Brian Koberger was doing right before his arrest. Police says a tactical team burst in to arrest the Idaho murder suspect. He was in pajamas and latest gloves, stuffing trash into Ziploc bags.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Pride, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
You guys know what to do, just like every other podcast. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the DT Show. Sorry I wasn't here yesterday. Family and Thanksgiving and everything that came in the day before. Just kind of ran out of time on Friday as well. But it's been an awesome week for myself. We just came back from the amusement park not too long ago with the family. Hope you guys have enjoyed y'all's Thanksgiving week and holidays. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell. Today, we're going to go back into the Jack and Lilly Sullivan disappearance. Deception detective, whose link is in the description. He had asked me, he commented in the comment section, and he asked me if he could do a video on a interview that I had posted up with Daniel Martell, the stepfather of Jack and Lilly Sullivan, a little boy and little girl who've gone missing and going on some time now, like 6-7 months now. They went missing May 2nd, 2025, and disappeared, vanished. And, a lot of people are saying that they disappeared into thin air and things like that without a trace. Not necessarily true, in my opinion, but we'll break it down. We'll talk about it. But Deception Detective, links in the description. He commented on the interview saying, hey, would it be all right if I utilize your interview with Daniel Martell? Gave him the okay and the heads up, and the okay and the thumbs up, and he went along with it. I've seen it, and I'd like to respond to some of the things that he had said as well. This is not a response in a negative manner by any means. I have a lot of respect for the Deception Detective and the work he does. I hope that he can come on the panel sometime. It'd be nice to see him. I like his perspective and his viewpoint on things. And so without further ado, let's break it down. Let's look at what it is that he said, and then I'll respond with my opinion and my response. It's kind of weird watching me also through some of this. You're going to see me talking with Daniel throughout part of this. You're going to see some of our commenters or commenters in the live chat. For instance, like Lori, who's up on the screen already. And so without further ado, we're going to listen to it, listen to his perspective, and then give my my perspective on top of it, and say, hey, there's probably going to be a lot of it that we agree on, some of it probably not, but we'll see. I've seen this once, put some things to the side, and we'll watch it. So without further ado, let's get into it. Confident in where. Oh, also, I want to say happy birthday to Jeremiah. I know he's in the live chat somewhere. I hope you're celebrating. I hope it's a good one for you, my man. And I hope you guys have a good one. Enjoy yourselves. All right, without further ado, let's do this. The investigation is going.
It's a little bit different from my point of view versus, the public eye. But right now, I'm fairly happy with what they're doing. I mean,
there's one other thing I probably should have preferenced, and I haven't said this up to this point, but this interview with me and Daniel is slightly sped up. I had sped it up about 0.7, not a huge amount. Daniel talks a little slow. I talk a little slow. And so it was too slow for my comfort. So I did speed up the speed a little bit with the original video interview. So if you're watching it and a lot of people are saying, oh, he's speaking, one way or another, his speed is good. It's actually, he speaks a little bit slower than that.
they're pulling out all the stops. I mean, cadaver dogs took a long, or human remains dogs took a long time to come in, but I mean, everything's falling into place like it should. It's just the amount of time that's passed. It's just, for some people, it's not fast enough.
That's Daniel Martell, and I think he knows what happened to his missing stepkids. And it's not just because he said everything's falling into place while they're still missing. So in today's video, let's watch his recent interview on the Drunk Turkey Show and count all the lies. I've only seen part of this because I wanted to react to it with all of you. So let's dive in.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the DT Show. We got an excellent show planned out. Stepfather for Lilly and Jack. Welcome, Daniel. How are you doing, my man? How's it going? Now, Deception Detective believes that Daniel is lying. I too believe that I've detected some deception when it comes to Daniel as well, in certain aspect of it. Now, some of it might be because one reason or another. Does it mean because he's been deceptive because of he did something or he has something to hide when it comes to the kids? Maybe, perhaps. I don't know. When I look at the evidence that's been laid out by the RCMP, I don't believe so. So, it comes down to, is there some stuff that maybe perhaps he's hiding out of embarrassment, out of, not wanting people to know? And then also, are there things that he has said that are misspoken words? Are they things of inaccuracy? Not necessarily that he's purposefully trying to mislead anybody with the statements that he's making, but is he confusing some of the details and or maybe even his own words and saying something that he may not have meant or misspoke on certain things? I'm sure if we look at everything that all of us or any of us have ever said, we're finding some misspoken words here or there. But are there any signs of deception? I told you guys, for me, I asked him about, his drug use, and I asked him in the interview, about his drug use, and he was open about it. He said that he had used drugs in the past, and it had been some time. I asked him what he was doing that night. Now, this was a separate interview than the one that Deception Detective is talking about. And in that interview, he says he doesn't remember. I don't like that answer because, one, and he goes on to say, well, it's been 6 months. How can you expect somebody to remember something 6 months ago? I agree, and I get it. But, that's if this was the first time I'm asking you to remember something 6 months ago. And it wasn't. I'm sure that he's been asked multiple times by RCMP detectives and law enforcement what he was doing the night before. So I didn't like it. Malaya's camp, the folks that I've spoken to on Malaya's side, have alluded that they believe, or that Malaya has told them at certain points that Malaya's caught him doing things with narcotics that night. Now, Daniel, he told me that wasn't true. I wasn't there that night, so I can't run in and say, oh yeah, 100%, that's absolutely true, or whatever the case may be. But like I said, I can't say that that's true or not. But to me, I too felt like he wasn't being 100% forthcoming when it came to that.
I'm still staying strong there, Daniel. I mean, every day is a new day.
Before we get too deep, I just want to thank Drunk Turkey for doing this interview and giving me permission to react to it. I'll link his channel down below. I've personally asked Daniel multiple times for an interview, but he's never accepted. And to be fair, I think the reason why is pretty simple. My name is Deception Detective, and he's a liar. In today's video, I'll point out plenty of examples of it. But just in case you're new here, just because I think someone's a liar, it doesn't mean I think they're a murderer. If you binge watch my entire series about this case, you'll already know what I think happened. If not, don't worry. They're about to get into that, and I'll explain it the next time I pause.
Welcome to the show, Daniel Martell, the stepfather for Lilly and Jack. Welcome, Daniel. How are you doing, my man? How's it going?
I'm still staying strong there, Daniel. I mean, every day is a new day.
Yeah, I hear you. I know there's been some activity recently. There's been some dogs in the area. They've been doing some searches. I know that that has been on your property. They looked at your property. So I know that there's still movement in the case. Right now, are you confident in where the investigation is going?
It's a little bit different from my point of view versus, the public eye. But right now, I'm fairly happy with what they're doing. I mean, they're pulling out all the stops. I mean, cadaver dogs took a long, or human remains dogs took a long time to come in, but I mean, everything's falling into place like it should. It's just the amount of time that's passed. It's just, for some people, it's not fast enough.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's a sad situation. Jack and Lilly went missing in May. I couldn't imagine how you guys were feeling in the moment of having kids missing, and then somewhat like the entire world turning against you. How has that been for you guys? Has it kind of calmed down? Has things gotten worse here recently?
No, Daniel, it never calms down. Some of those Facebook groups, they're absolutely relentless every day.
At the time of this interview, Daniel's kids had been missing for months. They disappeared in May 2025. But notice how he's not impatient about it. The police are moving too slow for other people, presumably you and I. And this inappropriate level of patience and kindness to the police, as well as the general public, notice how he's frustrated that even those pesky Facebook groups just aren't as big as fans, is known as ingratiation. It's such a reliable indicator of someone trying to get away with something that it's a card in the deception deck. And what do I think Daniel's trying to get away with? Well,
all right. So first and foremost, I was the one that brought up the questions and the, about, how things are going and how things are going with Facebook groups, because not only with Daniel, but other people that have talked about this case, their families have been attacked. Their properties, their locations have been doxxed and things of that nature. And I know that for a fact when it comes to, Daniel and Janie, they have had, random people driving up into their driveways, drones driving above their house, and things are flying above their house, things of that nature. And so that was the reason behind the questioning and behind those things. Now, as far as the speed of which things go, in reality, now, let me pull this down. I wish I would have saved this part, but I don't think I did. You know what? I may have. Let me pull it up real quick. Maybe on page 10 of this real quick. All right, let me pull this up. This is the RCMP documents, and we're going to refer to these quite a bit. But Malaya's statement here when it comes to Daniel, let's see. What she had said was that Daniel was, I know I read it somewhere. I guess I didn't mark it down, but that Daniel had gotten upset with RCMP that they weren't doing things fast enough and things like that. At certain points, Daniel wasn't too pleased with RCMP, and it's in the documents. I just didn't highlight them here exactly where they were. But Daniel was at certain points, I guess you can say, during this interview, he says that he was pleased with the investigation and where it's going. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's been accused by a lot of people for doing something horrific. And one of the things that RCMP has done here recently is drop some documents that it basically indicate that this is what we've done to investigate Malaya and Daniel. And there's no evidence of anything, criminal or otherwise. And so I think that's the part of the investigation that he's, I guess, pleased with. But let's continue on.
Well, here's my theory from one of my earlier videos in this series. If you've binged all my videos about this case, you'll know I've thought since day one that Lilly and Jack probably suffered an accident and that their mom and her boyfriend, Daniel Martell, covered it up because of some sort of tentative guilt. For instance, because of the nature of the accident, they didn't report it because they knew that they would get in trouble for criminal neglect or drug possession, or maybe even signs of abuse on the kids' bodies if they reported it. There were multiple opportunities for an accident to befall these little kids.
All right. So he said something about an accident, something to do with drugs, possibly. And, for me, I've always said that if somebody wants to argue neglect, which he just said, that I mean, if you want to say they were responsible for these kids and those kids wandered off and they should have, done more to make sure that they didn't wander off, I can't argue against you. But like when it comes to the drug stuff, like I've talked to Taylor, which is Daniel's ex fling or whatever you want to call her, while they were, talking throughout this time frame. And one of the things that she had mentioned to me before everything went down was that she believed that Daniel had been doing drugs, maybe not necessarily during the time that Jack and Lilly had gone missing, but sometime recently before then. And that she had mentioned to me that Daniel had actually spoken to the RCMP. He had let them know about his use and when and where and things of that nature, and that they were well aware of that. And so he's been open about that and about that use being stimulants and stuff like that. He's not disclosed that. He was open about that in my interview as well. And so, when the deception detective comes in and says that, I think that this could have been something that may have happened and he's lying about it. He's been open about the drug stuff. So could there have been an accident? I think that there's a possibility of that, obviously. You can't rule that out 100%. But there are a few things that kind of make me believe it is unlikely to be the case. And I'll explain here in a second.
The trailer was cluttered. There were holes in the floor. There was probably exposed wood and nails everywhere. But even more disturbing is this description of Jack as being smaller than his peers, because that could be a result of malnutrition, which is a consequence of neglect. But even if it's not, and Jack was just small for his age, and even if the trailer itself wasn't as decrepit as it's described, that still wouldn't explain their mother Malaya's reticence in her one interview she did the day they were reported missing, or her silence ever since. As I often say on the channel, pleading the fifth in a missing child case is basically as good as a confession. And that's because, unlike any other sort of crime, if you plead the fifth when your kid is out there missing, you're hurting your own interests. Don't you want to find your kid? Speaking up is worth the risk if you're innocent.
And I agree with the deception detective here that if Malaya lawyered up, if she decided not to speak with law enforcement, that would be a huge red flag. And that would probably mean that that she's not talking for the betterment of her child, etc. Everything that he said. The problem is the deception detective is looking at this as, her talking to the media, talking to YouTubers, talking to social media, giving out statements as the same as talking to law enforcement. And unfortunately, that's just not the case, because as we see here in the documents, Malaya provided 4 statements to police. 2 statements were provided May 2nd, May 3rd, and one on May 4th. And then here it says a 4th statement was taken May 5th. She hasn't lawyered up. She also took a lie detector test and provided her cell phone for a forensic digital download and allowed law enforcement to go through her banking. And so as much as I agree with the deception detective that Malaya, had she only spoken maybe just once to law enforcement and never again, would have been a red flag. That's not what happened here. She has been 100% cooperative with law enforcement. She has, and that's what has allowed law enforcement to, as in their own words, utilize this investigation to eliminate her as a suspect. And that's in the documents here as well when it comes to Malaya. The sole purpose of the entire investigation was to eliminate her as a suspect and to find any evidence of a criminal offense or grounds for a criminal investigation. And all 3 of them, there wasn't anything there. And so, I'm not sure, where a lot of people can go with this at that point. This is the entire purpose behind it. And let's see. Says here, Malaya was willing to and agreed to undergo a polygraph examination in relationship to this investigation in an effort to eliminate her as a suspect in causing her children's disappearance and possible murder. So what was this for? To eliminate her as a suspect. As a suspect of what? Murder and the cause of the disappearance. So it's twofold. It's not just the murder. It's not just the disappearance. It's both. All right. And then at the end, once it's done, it says at this point of the investigation, the disappearance is not believed to be criminal in nature. Do not have reasonable grounds to believe a criminal offense has occurred. Polygraph examinations were conducted with the intention. That's a big word. Words matter here. What was the intention of the entire polygraph? Everything here was of ruling out that possibility. Rule out what possibility? The possibility that a crime had occurred and that the result of the disappearance was a result of either criminal activity or a criminal offense. That's not me saying this, ladies and gentlemen. This is the RCMP that is saying this. Not me. Not me. Let's continue.
But if you're guilty, your lawyer will definitely tell you not to speak up because there's no upside. So that's the gist of my theory. A death by accident or neglect, even with a cover-up, is still infinitely more likely than something like a first-degree murder or a stranger abduction. And as I pointed out in that video, there were plenty of opportunities for a fatal accident on that property, as well as signs of potential neglect.
So signs of a fatal accident on the property. It did not appear, based on the articles that have been written about the area or about the home, that it was cleaned. It sounds like it wasn't, I'm going to say it was filthy, right? But it wasn't cleaned. It was dirt. There was grime. There was mess. There was trash that was, in places. It wasn't cleaned. It wasn't like, they were expecting people to come over or anything like that. So the signs of a fatal accident, if something like that were to have occurred, they would have had to have cleaned up said fatal accident. Now, somebody might say, well, what about if they, got into Daniel's drugs? Well, even at that, the body does certain things when it overdoses. It, produces fluids in certain areas, foam, throw up, urination, defecation, those type of things where if you went into their house and you saw that their bed was made and the sheets were brand new and there was and there was the mattress was damp, well, those are some signs that something occurred there. But if those things aren't there and it appears to be a bed that somebody slept in, it's warm but not wet, and you have signs of life throughout there, then it's probably not a situation where a severe accident is going to occur. They're going to go in there, clean up, put the mess back on top of it, clean the mess, and not leave any evidence of a cleanup. It's almost impossible.
Some of which are coming up now.
So, let's back up. Let's go and start from the beginning. The kids missed school before their disappearance. A lot of people were looking at that in a suspicious manner. I know that they were seen on camera.
And there's one thing before we move forward. He says that he believes it was a mysterious accident or something of that nature. Here's the problem with that. Let's look at the documents here. And Deception Detective had actually come into the live chat the last time we were talking about Jack and Lilly. And I had explained to him that the ground and search rescue team were the teams that actually found the boot prints. He was under the impression it was the family members. That is not the case. On the RCMP documents under ground search and rescue, GSAR, it says here Amy Hansen was a search manager. She was the first lady of the search focused. And then it goes on to say what type of searches they did. But it says here, boot prints were found on the pipeline by GSAR Friday night into Saturday morning. So this is late in the evening, not by the family. This was found by GSR, Ground Search and Rescue, not by any of Malaya's family members. Ground Search and Rescue found them. There were clumps of them, and there were two different sizes. So I know some folks were coming around saying, well, the bus driver had a kid on an ATV, and maybe they got off the vehicle and they had to go urinate, and that's what made the footprints. Well, unless that person has 4 legs and 2 feet are different, there were 2 children, different sizes, because it goes on to say they were small in size and corresponded with what children would wear. This was also in the middle of nowhere. What we didn't know when this document released was that the footprints were found absolutely in the middle of nowhere. It was on the pipeline, but it wasn't like it was on the pipeline off the roadway. It was between the roads, in the middle of nowhere, in the vastness, and in what Daniel described as a very unlikely terrain that children could go through alone. And yet we're supposed to believe that not only were Jack and Lilly disappeared, but now there's 2 other kids that were out in the middle of nowhere on the pipeline and without parent supervision or parents around there, because these were 2 children footprints, not an adult and a child, meaning there was some other little child, 5-6 years old and younger, another child younger than that, out in the pipeline, the middle of nowhere, and they didn't get lost. But and the other thing is too, it's not hard to figure out if the children were somebody else. Now, law enforcement went through an extensive amount to investigate the boot prints to determine if they belonged to Lilly and Jack or if they belonged to somebody else. So a lot of people are going to be out here saying, all right, well, they heard of reports of people out there with kids searching. So they might be somebody else, because that's what it says, right? However, they go on to say they did think it was an out of the area way for people to bring their kids to the search. But for those that are stuck on the possibility that these could have belonged to some of Malaya's family, or the bus driver's kid that has 4 legs, then, well, one, it would have been easy. Just go and ask them, were you guys in this specific area of the pipeline? The answer is no. And can we see your shoes or your boot prints, or what size are your shoes? What size boots do you wear? If they're not the same, it's pretty easy to rule those things out. Now, the fact that they continued this search, because this goes on to say between May 17th and 19th, hold on, let's go back up. The boot prints was between, let's see, because it goes on, they were found on May 2nd going into May 3rd. They continued this investigation about the boot prints until, I want to say it was like the 27th of May. But let's continue. So, I mean, they went through this for almost a whole month trying to figure out, first and foremost, if they belonged to Jack and Lilly. So the boot prints were found on the pipeline by GSAR. They were small in size and corresponded with what children would wear. They didn't think that they were the kids in the area because they were out of the way. Let's see. Because it continues. More about the boot prints, 31. So on May 9th, all right. Analysis of the boot print. So this is on May 27th, between May 3rd and May 27th, 2025, efforts were made to confirm the boot print located on the pipeline in the search that belonged to Lilly. So this was that investigation. If you guys on the internet can come out and say, oh, we believe it was this person or that person, it's not hard for RCMP to have that same information and go and ask. And you know what? I'm pretty dang sure that they would have found out between this time frame if they could actually point in one other direction that it wasn't theirs. But this is the analysis of the boot print that was out there. So an effort was made to confirm the boot print. On May 3rd, a cast was taken of the boot print, and the boot print showed a specific number, 29, as part of the thread. They went out to Walmart and located several sizes of the same boot. The number was consistent with the case. The number consistent with the case, 29, was only found on size 11 boots. Other sizes had different numbers. So, for instance, size 12 had 30, size 10 had 27. Now, they went to Walmart on the 27th and looked with a record of transactions provided by Malaya. Who were they given to? It was provided by Malaya, not through warrants, not through trying to force her. She provided these things willingly. And this is why it's a good thing to get financial records, so you can, make sure you're looking in the right direction. So these financial records indicated that there was a Walmart transaction where Malaya purchased Lilly rainbow boots on March 20th that corresponded with size 11 boots. Then he goes on to say the investigator's comment says, because Lilly's boot was confirmed to be size 11, it is consistent with the boot print located on the pipeline in the search of near 1407 Gairloch Road. So, a lot of people are like, why do you look at the boot prints as such a big piece of evidence? Well, one, it's 2 pair of boot prints for 2 children that are similar size as Jack and Lilly. And the one boot print that does have a number matches the boots that were just recently purchased by Malaya from Walmart for Lilly, and they matched. And so what is the likelihood that 2 other kids were out on the pipeline during this time frame? Because it'd been raining also. So, the rain would have had an impact on the boot prints, right? So if they've been there for a minute or they've been there for a little bit, the rain could have caused an issue there. So these are prints that were recent. In the middle of nowhere. We'd have to believe that 2 other kids, without parents or guardians, were out there in the middle of nowhere, who, if they got lost on their own, just never were reported, and or also, during the same time frame that Jack and Lilly have gone, missing. So, if the, deception detective, he believes that this could have been an accident. Maybe the kids fell down or hurt themselves. Two things can't be right here. The two things cannot be right is that the kids left the 2 boot prints out in the middle of nowhere, and also something happened to them the night before. It's impossible. Those two things are impossible, in my opinion. Let me know in the comment section. Hit the like button if you agree with me. Hit the subscribe button if you agree as well. So hopefully that makes sense. I hope I explained that to you guys well. Midwest comes in with $199. Thank you so much, Midwest. Caught Up in Crime comes in with their membership for 17 months. Thank you, Caught Up in Crime. C Joy comes in with their membership for 15 months. And Truth for JNL. Lori comes in saying thank you and keeping us updated with facts. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. That's what I'm here for. All right, let's pull this back up and see what we got to continue on with here.
The day before they disappeared. So the fact that they were missing, as weird as it was, as far as the timing goes, doesn't necessarily mean something nefarious happened. But tell us, why weren't they in class?
Well, I know Wednesday they had what they call a PE day, which is kind of like an in-service, and so no children attended the school that day. And then on Thursday, Lily had a cough, and I really didn't know if Malaya was going to keep them home for Friday, but kind of turns out that she did. And when I woke up that morning, like I wasn't expecting the kids to be home. I seen Lily poke her head into the room a couple times that morning, and she didn't have a cough. She wasn't sick, not like the day before. So, I wouldn't really have kept them home because they were kept home a lot because they were sick a lot during the school year. But
allergies, or is this like
no? They just had low immune systems, Daniel.
Okay.
I mean, for like the first, I don't know, like 11 weeks of school, they were sick each week. Not they brought home COVID and stuff like that. Well, but you can't expect a kid to be perfectly healthy when they're hanging out with other children, right?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so it sounds like she was pretty bad the day before she went missing on Thursday.
Yeah, she did have a cough, but I was never expecting Malaya to keep them home for both days.
And so that was Malaya's decision then to keep.
Yeah, of course. She woke up that morning on the morning of the disappearance and marked Jack and Lily both as absent at 6:17 and 6:18 a.m.
It's actually shocking just how casually Daniel talks about textbook signs of neglect, like the kids being so sick they had to miss a day of school every week for 11 weeks, or saying that Lily's cough was so bad that they kept her home from school for 2 days, yet they never took her to a doctor. But what really stood out to me was his offhand comment that he and Malaya don't coordinate about where the kids will be for the day. Malaya unilaterally decided to keep both kids home from school that day. Who's going to watch them? Just to be clear, I don't think any of that actually happened. I think he and Malaya scripted it to alibi each other. But my point is, even if you were telling the truth, this story alone would be enough to raise serious concerns about neglect. And why?
All right. So I would hate if you ever had a year where your kids got sick and something happened and you're looking at it as a suspect just because your kids were sick about that year. But it does bring up some good points, why weren't they taken to the doctor? Why weren't they done this or that? I don't know. I don't know the situation out there in Canada. I know that they have a different health care than out here in the United States. I don't know how easy it is to go out and see a doctor. I don't know if there's like copays and a bunch of other things that go on. And you also have some folks that live out in the country and they're rural. People live differently. Some folks go to the doctor for every little thing. Some folks wait a while before they go to the doctor. And, who's right, who's wrong, I don't know. But, he mentioned something else about Malaya. He said that Malaya and Daniel have scripted something together. The problem with that is that Malaya and Daniel haven't spoken with each other since May 3rd. In fact, it's even in the court documents here. Let's go back up to Malaya's statement. Let's see. Page 14 here. All right. Malaya said she had not spoken with Daniel since May 3rd, 2025. She's blocked him and they've not opened up any of his Snapchat messages. And Daniel's told me the same thing. In fact, Daniel's told me that Malaya's reported him on 2 separate occasions. One occasion was, I believe he tried to give her mail back. And another occasion was that he had parked closer to her. In fact, that was in the interview when they had their CPS thing where they were meeting up for Meadow. they're also going through a custody battle. These guys have blocked each other. They have turned on each other and have done everything that an investigator would want. An investigator wants their two suspects to stop talking. They don't want what he just said. What deception detective said is for them to work out an alibi, to keep it airtight and sealed so that way they don't say something different. Again, neither one of these people have lawyered up to like a criminal lawyer for this case. They have civil lawyers for their custody and stuff like that, but not a criminal lawyer for the case. And they've been super cooperative, and they have talked multiple times with law enforcement without talking to each other. So they have separated themselves. That's the first thing that you want. And then you want them to turn on each other. Daniel has told me things like that Malaya would, and to me, it sounded more like horseplay, like kind of trip Jack if he was walking by, kind of kick his foot, things like that, push him. But he used the term abuse. And Malaya has told people that she believed that Daniel was using drugs. And so that doesn't sound like two people that are working together with an alibi, working together to maintain a airtight alibi. It sounds quite different. And again, you have two people who've turned on each other, who've given up a bunch of information, who's cooperated with law enforcement throughout this entire time. Those are usually folks that if they've done something, get caught pretty quickly. Just not the case here.
Why do I think they're lying? Well, all the inconsistencies. For example, Malaya said that she's the one who woke up and asked Daniel where the kids are. He said he's the one who woke up and asked her. But there's even interpersonal inconsistencies between Daniel's different interviews. For example, he told Drunk Turkey he didn't know Lilly would be kept home that day, but he also said that he wasn't totally asleep, he knew everything that was going on, and that Malaya called the school to mark the kids absent. So how did he not know the kids were going to be home? Here's a couple more gaping plot holes in their story from my video, He Slipped Up.
Malaya and baby were asleep. Lilly came in multiple times. I was not in deep sleep by any means. And then about 20 minutes passed. And then when I woke up, Malaya was right beside me. She was still asleep. And I said, I don't hear Lilly and Jack. I ran up in the woods to the kids. They have cabins up in the woods, which only took me like 30 seconds. I came right back down. She was on the phone with the RCMP.
There are a ton of problems with this story, so let's go through them one by one. First, as I already pointed out, it directly contradicts Malaya's version of events, which is typical of co-conspirators reciting a scripted story. The made-up stuff just doesn't stick as well in the brain as a real memory. Second, it's extremely vague, especially when it comes down to the timing of everything. For instance, he said that Lilly came into the room multiple times, and then suddenly he's saying 20 minutes later he woke up. He woke up 20 minutes after what exactly? Third, the story just isn't reasonable, which is one of the criteria from the Assessing Stories card in my deception deck. If his story is true, Malaya called the police before they'd even checked the backyard to see if the kids were out there. Remember?
That's not what he said. He said that he went out there to go and look, and by the time he got back, she was on the phone with law enforcement. That's not what he had said. And again, they're not. Is there a difference between misspeaking and things of that nature? The information was that Jack and Lilly were up. They could hear him. Lilly popped in her head a couple of times. He says he's seen her. According to the RCMP documents, Malaya says that she saw Lilly coming in and out. She turned on the TV because they were loud. And, whether or not he wakes up and says, I don't hear them, or she wakes up and says, I don't hear them, I'm not necessarily saying, oh my God, there it is. That's it. They're lying. I think that given the pressure and given, how much attention that this case has been brought up, people misspeak, people get things wrong. I've told people that want to, point at Jack or point at Daniel or Malaya and say that, oh, during this interview or that, they may have said something inaccurate. I've challenged them to come up here and I'll ask them some simple question that first graders should know. And let's see if the lights and the pressure has an effect on their answers and their ability to answer quickly and within reason. And if that doesn't have an effect, because I'm sure everybody has watched the show or whatever, and they see these answers, these questions popping up and know all the answers to them. And then wonder why, these folks that are out there can't do it. Well, some of it's the pressure. Now, I'm not making excuses for Daniel or anything like that. It's just, in the end, is it really that much different than what they're saying. Now, to me, I think it'd be different if Daniel said that he woke up and Malaya was in the living room, and then he told somebody else that he woke up and Malaya was in the bed, and then told a third person that he woke up in the living room. Now, I think those would be some pretty major inconsistencies. The fact that one of them woke up and said, "I don't hear the kids," and he's saying it was him, she's saying it was her. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if they both believed that it was them, because, you don't hear the kids, you don't hear the kids. I mean, you could ask both, they both could have asked that almost simultaneously. But I don't think it's something that is glaringly out there that says, all right, this is a red flag. Is it inaccurate? Possibly. I don't know who's right and who's wrong in that situation.
He said that they noticed the kids were being quiet. He immediately went outside for 30 seconds. And when he came back, she was already calling the police. Finally, the tone of the story itself is off. Another criteria from ISS.
And the fact that he says that he was out there for 30 seconds, I mean, that could be like, come on. It takes longer for him to get out there and say the kids' names. Him being inaccurate or misspeaking about the amount of time that he was out there, I'm not surprised. It's not like he had his phone with him. Apparently, he said he didn't have his phone with him or anything like that. It's not like him or anybody else were documenting how long they were out in the woods and those type of things. I just, I don't know. And if your kids are missing and they got out, what's wrong with calling law enforcement right away? I don't get the suspicion there for that.
Already calling the police. Finally, the tone of the story itself is off. Another criteria from my assessing stories card. And by that, I mean Daniel's main objective here is to alibi Malaya. He made a point of telling us that he wasn't totally asleep and that she was definitely sleeping next to him when he woke up and she couldn't have crept off. But if his story is true, he can't be 100% sure about that. And what about these contradictions? Is he not concerned that her story doesn't match his? He doesn't even seem to be concerned that a kidnapper might have taken the kids.
See, that's not true at all. That's not true at all. Daniel, throughout this entire time frame, has been kind of pointing the blame at Malaya. In fact, the reason I was asking him in the interview, certain things about, could Malaya have woken up? How asleep were you? Would you have woken up if Malaya got out of bed? Like, I recommend going back and watching the interview, because I went into those questions with him, because his thoughts were that Malaya, his belief is that Malaya had somebody go and pick up the kids. And for whatever reason did this so that she can somehow gain custody of Meadow and keep the kids from going, whether it's to go in a CPS or going wherever. I don't know. I really don't understand his thought there. I just don't agree with it. But he has forcibly placed the blame on Malaya several times. And in the interview, it was me who was trying to roll that out as a possibility that Malaya had done something. And it was I who was doing that with my form of questioning on how is it possible, because he was thinking that Malaya may have gotten up. Maybe they turned on the TV. Maybe she turned on the TV, and that was because, so that he doesn't hear anything and don't wake up. And I was like, how could she have gotten out of bed without you noticing? That was me trying to explain to Daniel, because that's his thought process. That's what he believes. So it's a little bit off here, but nothing too crazy with Deception Detective.
Doesn't even seem to be concerned that a kidnapper might have taken the kids, or the kid's biological dad who's still out there somewhere. His sole objective, it seems, is to alibi himself and Malaya. As I always say on the channel.
Well, again, I don't think he's trying to alibi Malaya, but also by this point, law enforcement has kind of cleared out the Cody and some other folks. I would understand, Deception Detective's concern here about Daniel's tone throughout the interview. If this interview had taken place within a couple of weeks of the disappearance, but it's been some time.
Lying is hard enough. Add in two people who have to align their stories and it becomes almost impossible. All right, let's keep watching, because the best or the worst is yet to come.
And so the last time that they're seen is on camera the day before. What happened the night after they're seen on camera? What was that night like?
The night they were seen on camera, they were seen on Thursday. They were seen at Dollarama, and then we went to Acropole. We got some food and then brought it home. When we got home, it was a little bit before 4:00, and I went outside and helped Mom work on the fence. It took me a little while to find all my tools and stuff, but then, after I got my drill and everything else, and I helped mom work on the fence for quite a few hours until it was just coming on to dark. And then after it was dark, I came back inside. What I remember, the kids were sleeping, but when you're looking back in time, Daniel, it's hard to, kind of remember everything and get a feeling for how the night really was, because it just seemed like a normal night, right? When I came inside, I thought the kids were sleeping, and I could have swore they were sleeping, but it says in the documents that she had them up till 9 or 10 at night. I don't remember them being up that late, so I'll tell you that.
Were you looking at your phone or your watch at what time it was every?
I will also say that, when it came to like the time and stuff like that, or the documents themselves, there's a specific point where RCMP disclosed that Daniel said something to the effect, "I'm trying to be honest with you guys. I'm not trying to lie. It's just hard for me to remember everything. I've lost everything." When they asked him, "What do you mean by that?" He's like, "Well, my two other kids, their mom's not letting him see those two kids. Malaya left and blocked him. Jack and Lily are gone. Meadow was taken by CPS. He had completely lost everything in his family, and he was having a difficult time coming up with some of the answers that they were asking him." And, the fact that they put up there that he was having some problems there, or saying that he's trying to be honest, but he's having some difficulties. He's not trying to lie or anything like that. He's just having some difficulty remembering. And it had to do with when they went to the Dollarama. He thought that was on Wednesday. It ended up being on Thursday. So it wasn't anything too crazy. In fact, I think it actually helped him because it had proof of life much later. Imagine if it was Wednesday was the last time somebody had seen them on camera, the accusations would have been through the roof that something happened on Thursday, etc. And so that should be an idea of how much trouble he was having remembering things. Because at the end of the day, law enforcement have looked back into him. They had his phone, they had his locations, they had his financial records. Our CMP documents indicate that he utilized his debit card for much of his transactions. In fact, Malaya is the one that said that it was much of the purchases were through his transaction. So that's going to leave a digital footprint of where he was and what he was doing, plus his phone and his locations. This is only the stuff that we do know. Is it possible that they have him and the kids on camera, other places with the vehicle, etc.? Very much likely. Very much likely.
Yeah. I mean, I got a watch on my arm the whole time, and I never look at it, man. I'm always grabbing for my phone.
It's not uncommon unless you're like something specifically happens and you look at the time at that specific time. I know a lot of people are looking at, certain times where, I think they were asleep by 9:30 and then documents say 10. And like, oh my God, there's 30 minutes here that
yeah.
It's a little bit of a wild expectation for people to expect to remember things, especially on, like you mentioned, on a night that was pretty normal. But that night, what time did you go to bed?
I went to bed actually a lot later than Malaya did, I think. Like, Malaya was already asleep when I came into bed. I remember flicking on the light for the kids at 12 at night, or a little bit after 12, so a little bit after midnight, and both of the kids were fast asleep under the covers. So, but I never get a chance to see what clothing they were wearing because the blankets were up on them, right?
Did you see the backpack?
I don't remember the backpack, the strawberry backpack, but that was always in Lily's room, right?
Okay.
Like that was always in Lily's room. Like she never took it out of there, right? That was her backpack it wasn't a school backpack. I know a lot of people think that, but she actually had a pink LOL doll, like for school, and that was her. And the backpack she ended up taking was the one that we bought for when she took her grandmother's, right? Which would be Cindy Murray.
So when she goes on trips, this was the backpack for trips.
Yeah. She didn't take her school backpack. She took her one that.
And the whole purpose of him saying this is because he believes that somebody came and they used that backpack because that was her trip backpack, and that she went on a trip with somebody and somebody took her. Deception. I'm not sure what Deception Detective thinks that Daniel is thinking, because it doesn't sound like and again, I mean, he said that he hasn't spoken to Daniel. I've spoken extensively with him. So I kind of got maybe a little bit of an understanding of, like, for instance, he says he answers his questions with the term right a lot, whether it's about this or anything else in general. He'll be like, yeah, I'm like, hey, how are you? And, your mom doing? What'd y'all do this weekend? He's like, oh yeah, this happened. So, we had to go do this, right? And we had to go do that because of that, right? And like everything else it just answers in that same area. I get it from the outside looking in, and it being maybe perhaps, first time watching an interview of his that is unedited, that is unscripted, and that is fully the whole thing. Because yes, he's done other interviews and things of that nature, but those have all been edited. Those have all been a lot of things have been done to him. Daniel and Janie will come out here and say it to themselves that their interviews were significantly longer and cut down and shrunk, and only certain parts and pieces, and it may not even be in the right order of things, and a lot of people have looked at those things and made an opinion about them based off of what is presented in front of them. For instance, like in some interviews where he's talking about like social media not being too keen on him, and a lot of people are saying, well, why is he starting off the interview like that? That may not be how the interview started. It's just how the media portrayed the interview to start. I can tell you this. I've been interviewed by some of these major media places like Hulu, was it ABC? We had so many people, Amazon Prime, Netflix had contacted so many of us. But when we did one of these interviews, me and Blue, and the interview that came out, 100% different. The context was out of place. Some of the questions that they asked and the answers that we gave were taken from different questions that we answered. That's how shady some of this crap can be. And so, looking at a full interview and understanding, how a person talks and looking at the context of things, it also changes maybe perhaps a certain perception of it.
He takes on trips. Trips or overnight trips or to go to visit. She would use that backpack.
There's lots of problems here, so let's go through them one by one. First, remember, Drunk Turkey was asking Daniel about the night the kids disappeared. And what did Daniel do? He gave us a bunch of hedged answers, letting us know that he's not quite sure about when they went to bed, doesn't quite remember, he didn't check the time, which is bad enough. Liars tend to use exclusion, qualifiers, and hedges because they don't want to get caught in a lie. But what's worse is
or he wasn't looking at his watch when he went to bed. I mean, how many... I know I do, sometimes if it's getting late, I'll look, oh crap, it's a little late. But, like for instance, I don't work tomorrow and things like that. I didn't work today. I couldn't tell you the exact time I went to bed or anything like that last night. I'll tell you it was after midnight, but that's about it. And so, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Laughing about it and joking with Drunk Turkey. In other words, he's ingratiating himself with Turkey at the expense of looking like a parent who's genuinely wondering, where are my kids? What could have happened? Was there something the night before that I missed? Maybe they weren't actually in the beds. Daniel did something else that manipulators often do. Instead of deep diving into the night before like Drunk Turkey wanted to do, remember, he was asking for a timeline or even reminiscing about the last time he saw Jack alive. Remember, if his story's true, going into the bedroom that night was the last time he saw Jack alive. He latched onto the question about Lily's backpack and went off on a tangent. In other words, he used one of the favorite tactics of bad liars who are getting pressed on something they don't want to talk about, latching onto a minor detail, running with it, and hoping that the interviewer forgets the line of questioning. You might have...
So I get his point, but that's not what was happening there. His whole thing, Daniel, has been, and he kind of wanted it out there, was that Malaya, that the backpack was a backpack that she took on trips because he believes that Malaya had something to do with, not necessarily in like a nefarious thing, but that he and Janie believe, whether they're lying and saying that's what they believe, but their whole premises behind that is that they believe that Malaya had somebody, whether it was Cindy or some family member, come out and pick up the kids. I don't buy it. That's not what I believe, but I completely get where Deception Detective is coming from here.
I've also noticed that he started answering every question with a question mark. Well, that was always in her room, right? She had it, right? That's yet another way that insecure liars protect themselves from getting caught in a lie. Because if someone points out the discrepancy, they can always just say, well, I was wondering it. I wasn't saying it as a fact.
And me and Daniel have kind of got into that before because, like, for instance, I've talked about the boot prints with him, and because I got frustrated with Daniel and I asked him about the boot prints, and not necessarily that I asked him if he had actually gone out to the boot print site He said, no. I said, why not? And he's like, well, they could have been somebody else's kids. I was like, I don't care whose they could have been. Why haven't you gone out there? Why haven't you physically gotten off your tail and walked your little ass out there and checked where the boot prints are? At the end of the day, Malaya's gone, right? She took off. You're the only person in the area there who can walk the trail and look at the footprints in the direction that they were traveling and see if anything sticks out to you that Jack or Lilly would have been attracted to, you know, whether there was a clearing, whether there was this or that. You're the one that knows them more than anybody else. Get up and go. And then there was some clothing or something like that was found not too far away from where the boot prints were. And I asked him to go out there, and he's like, well, that can be this. And I was like, dude, stop coming up with excuses and get out there and go. I don't care what you think about this or that. And I finally got fed up with him, and I said, dude, the damn boot prints aren't planted, and neither was the damn blanket. Like, stop with that crap already. Like, I got fed up with him, to be honest with you, you know, because he kept saying that, oh, well, that's planted, and he just coming up with these excuses. And I was like, no, dude, you know, same thing. Like everybody, like you want to say, you know, Malaya would have, you know, she took off. She didn't, you know, go out and search. Well, dude, there's fucking footprints out there. Excuse my language, but there's footprints out there, and you can go and check. I mean, I live in Texas. If I lived in Canada or anywhere near, I'd go and check myself. You know what I mean? So to me, it's just, I don't like it, but, you know, I get it. And as far as the whole question mark on everything, that's just the way Daniel talks. You know, with everything I talked to him about, you know, just stuff that's in general. You know, we started talking about his vehicle and the car accident that he had gotten into. Had nothing to do with Jack and Lilly, and everything was like, yeah, you know, I was going this way, right, and this, that, and that, right, and question mark this, question mark that. So to me, you know, I get where Deception Detective is coming from, but I just think it's more so the way he talks.
The layout of the house look like? So
the layout of the house is, we have the bedroom at the very end.
Okay.
And then we have Lily and Jack's room and my other kid's bedroom and the bathroom and the kitchen and the living room.
Okay.
So
how many bedrooms is that?
3 bedroom.
3 bedrooms. And I know some people have asked, like, you know, Lily and Jack, they shared a bedroom. Was there a reason why one wasn't in one room and one wasn't in the other?
Well, my other kids are in the other bedroom. I mean, it really didn't matter if, like, but I know my daughter Rain and Arlo, they like to be in the same bedroom and they like to play together, right?
Yeah.
So, and it was a lot different from my other 2 kids, not having like any other kids involved, like with me and being a family before this, right? So it was kind of new to them. It was kind of new to Lily and Jack as well, especially with the new baby coming in too. So it was a little bit different for everybody.
And so, yeah, your other children, they weren't there that night, correct?
No, they weren't. They were there the weekend prior.
So relative to where Jack and Lily's bedroom is to where you guys sleep, how close is that? Is that?
Yeah, it's actually the next bedroom. It's actually the next bedroom over.
And you guys mentioned that you guys could hear them throughout the morning. Is that correct?
Yes, I actually did hear. I know when it says in the documents that we heard them in the next room over, like in their bedroom. I didn't hear them in their bedroom. I heard when Lily would pop in, I heard Jack in the kitchen.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I heard him rustling around in the kitchen, right? But then when me and Malaya made our way out to the kitchen, there was nothing moved. The chairs were still perfectly in place. There was no chairs pulled up against a counter for them to, you know, they usually would jump up and take food if they wanted, because kids always do that, right? They would go into the fridge. They would go into the other pantry and grab food if they wanted. Like, they had unlimited food if they wanted to grab it. And, you know, they would go in the fridge, take yogurt cups and eat them, or cereal or whatever. So, but nothing was moved, Daniel. Nothing was moved.
Now, they're being loud-ish. I mean, loud enough for you guys to hear them. Your other daughter, Meadow, she was there, though, right?
Yeah, she was actually laying beside me with Malaya.
Did you guys ever, or did Malaya ever tell the kids to be quiet? Were they ever waking up Meadow at any point with their noise?
In that morning, no. But when Lily poked in, I did go, shh. Like, when, you know, she would come in the room, because she always woke up Meadow. Same with Jack, but I mean, that's what kids do too, right? Yeah. And so, you know, some folks are saying that, you know, they may have walked out the back sliding glass door
That seems like the only logical explanation for them to have exited the house. You had something on the front door, correct?
Yeah, on the front porch, where there's the front porch door, and then there's the inner door on the front. And I know for 100% they did not go out through that door. So, because when I went and got the keys and tried to come back into the house, couldn't get into the front door, right? I had to go around from the back. And then I went out through the front door.
Gotcha.
So that's how I know they did not exit through the front. They exited out through the back sliding glass door.
Remember, Jack Sullivan was 4 years old. We're being told he climbed around the kitchen unsupervised, climbed up onto counters, and fed himself. These are all telltale signs of neglect. We're also...
I don't think that's what he said. He said that he got into food and things like that. Not that he was constantly just feeding himself, right? I mean, I got kids, man, and my kids, even at 4 years old or even younger, got into the fridge, got into things, you know. So I wouldn't go that far of saying, oh, because they got into the pantry, because they got into the fridge, because they got into this is a telltale sign of neglect, and the kids were not fed. I don't. I'm not there. Not there.
Supervised, climbed up onto counters, and fed himself. These are all telltale signs of neglect. We're also being asked to believe that this property, which we got a tour of in my video, It's Painfully Obvious, I'll link that on the end card, was pristine unless a kid moved something. It might be the most implausible thing Daniel said so far in this interview. There's still plenty more bombshells coming up from what I've seen, so if you want to continue this analysis, let me know by liking, commenting, and sharing. I'll put my entire Lilly and Jack Sullivan playlist on the end card if you want to binge watch it and catch up.
And so that's going to do it for Deception Detective. Again, you know, I think that what Daniel was trying to say is that he could hear some rustling in the kitchen, and that because kids normally get into things, he would have expected to see the fridge gone through, the pantry door open, the pantry food gone through, you know, maybe perhaps some of the chairs or things moved around. If they got on the countertop to get, you know, access to some other snacks that the kids may have liked, and nothing was moved. Nothing was moved. So if the kids were in there getting into a mess, you know, it's unlikely that they completely cleaned it up and moved everything back, especially at that age. Right. So Daniel's point to that was that he believes somebody was in the house getting them ready and took them out. Now he believes that Malaya was in cahoots with that person. You know, that's Daniel's thoughts and beliefs. I don't subscribe to that. I don't believe that that's to be the case. I think that as much as Daniel did, so did Malaya with RCMP and their investigation. And so, you know, food for thought. I do get a lot of what Deception Detective is saying here. Again, I hope he can come on the channel. I'd love to have a conversation so we can kind of maybe go back and forth on some of the things versus just kind of responding to this, you know, some of these things. Because I don't want it to come off as me trying to also like discredit or anything like that. That's not at all what I'm doing. You know, I have a major respect for him, and I like his get up. But you know, I would love to have the opportunity to have him on the panel and maybe have the opportunity to go back and forth. I think it would be a good show. You know, I think it'd be good for myself to maybe perhaps also learn some things, because I've not been a guy that's been here day one, right? I wasn't covering this case from the word go, just here recently, and just kind of looking at things from a holistic and my opinion, a fact-based and evidence-based perspective. We have a couple of super chats and things. We got Truth for J&L, Jack and Lily. Thanks for keeping us updated with the facts. We have Bubbles and Dolls coming with $3 super sticker, and Joy gifting a Drunk Turkey Show membership. I'll be here for the next 5-10 minutes. Please put a couple of stars. If you have any comments for me or questions, put a couple of stars in the comment section so I know that you're talking to me. Let's bring it up. Let's talk about it, and we'll go forward from there. So let's see. I think DD is trying to make it sound more than it was. It makes for a better video views. What 4-year-old doesn't climb up on counters and take food? They're into everything. I agree. I agree with that. 4-year-olds climb up and to get into everything. You know, I don't know, deceptive detectives, family situation. He may not have kids or things like that, but I don't know. Let's see. So that means that nobody fed the kids by the time that Daniel got up and saw the kitchen. I agree. That was probably what that would mean. I love some deceptive detective. He's good. He's good at what he does. Like I said, I like to have him on. I think he does look at things fact-based and stuff like that. Is there any proof the kids in the morning? I mean, if you're looking for like video surveillance or things of that nature, probably not. But proof that they left the house, you got some boot prints that are in the middle of nowhere that match Lily and Jack, especially Lily's down to the boot print size that she just gotten some boots purchased for her. So I would say that that's kind of there. Let's see. DT is a good host, but clearly does not understand the significance of seeing certain signs of deception. Oh, I mean, here's the thing, my man. MCM 2014. I'm not saying I'm right about everything or anything like that, but go follow my work on what I've talked about when it comes to like the Brian Koberger case or some of these other cases that I've recently talked about where I've kind of predicted things with a fair amount of accuracy of what's going to happen, what law enforcement means or what they're doing and what's going to come out. A lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm actually was in law enforcement. And also, I can tell when somebody's lying and when somebody's not. Like I said, I know that Daniel hasn't been 100% forthright with me. I can tell you what I think he hasn't been forthright with me on. Now, does that mean that he's trying to cover up something crazy? If RC and P didn't come out with the evidence and the investigation and everything else that they've come forth with, I'd probably say maybe, there's a good chance of that. But that's not the world we live in. RC&P has investigated him. He's cooperated. That'll be another thing as if like deceptive detective here said that had he lawyered up, had he pled the fifth, had he not taken the lie detector test, had he not want to give up his phone, had he not want to give up his locations, and had he not want to give up his bank and financial records, then I would be like, yeah, there's some deceptive here. There's some signs of people that are hiding things to the point where they're afraid that they're going to get busted in some sort of case. But they didn't do that. They did the exact opposite. They've been 100% forthcoming. They've come forth to RC&P multiple times to be interrogated. They were willing to take lie detector tests, which, by the way, they both passed. I mean, like I said, if you're this, detecting some sort of deception off of the RC&P's investigation, then by all means, I guess. But to me, I think I understand the signs of deception. I felt DD was misleading at points, but in my opinion, he was referencing it breaking so late in the morning before the parents got up. Kids were to fend for themselves. So we know that the kids must have gotten out at least after 8:48 a.m. They were accustomed to waking up early. Should they have been fed by then? Possibly, yeah. I would agree to that. Baby's pamper wasn't changed or bottle, etc. By 9 a.m. Yeah, that's possible. That's probably a big issue. I don't deny that that's an issue. Yeah, the deception detective is pretty skilled. It is very fascinating. Honest question, Daniel. If you had a small children like that and heard them up running in the kitchen, would you just roll over and go back to sleep in the morning? I mean, me personally, no, obviously. However, somebody else doing that, there's been folks, and I'm not saying that this was their scenario because it's not, but there's been folks who work multiple jobs, single parents, single moms, who, had to take naps or breaks during the day, before work or whatever the case may be. And maybe sometimes will stay on the couch and let their kids run around. And it's not the right thing to do, but no, I get it. And that's not the scenario that Daniel and Malaya were in either, right? They were both just in bed. Should they have woken up? 100%. They probably should have gotten out of bed. This is why I say, if somebody wants to argue that they were being neglectful and they should have taken care of them, that they had a responsibility for those kids to not get outside that door, I can't argue with that. And I'm not going to argue with that. That's, I would just say, to the same token, look at your life. And if you have kids and think to yourself, if you've ever taken your eyes off your kids for a moment, and for a moment they they walked away from you, and whether it was at a store or at the Walmart or at the grocery store, and you had to go somewhere, whether they did it on purpose, trying to play a prank on you and go hide in the rack of clothes or whatever the case may be, and you lose them for a second. Now imagine in that one moment, and I'm not saying this has happened with them, but in that moment, the wrong person at the right time comes across the kids. And now you're perceived as the person who is this horrible, horrible parent because you didn't keep track of your kids 24/7. You weren't that hawk or that camera 100% of the time over them. It's a slippery slope. So to me, I get it. Somebody wants to argue those things, 100%, go ahead, argue those things. And I'm not going to say that they didn't have a responsibility to make sure that those kids didn't get outside of that house without adult supervision. Can't say that at all. But I do know that there's been a lot of good people who weren't doing anything wrong, and their kids doing kid things get out, whether they open a window, whether they just sneak out, whether they do this or that. And sometimes bad things happen. And creating more victims out of it just because you feel that the parents should have acted one way or another, and vilifying them even more, or throwing blame at them and calling them children killers and things of that nature. That's a big step, one I'm not comfortable taking until I see true and hard evidence that points to something like that. And when you have RCMP's documents that have been dropped and released to the point where you have these neighbors, now you really want to question why the neighbors are lying. Mr. Deception Detective, please, I ask you, what makes you to look into Justin Smith and Bradley Wong, two guys that had to talk to each other to get their story straight, as you mentioned, two people that didn't come forward right away, two people that took their time, spoke to each other. In fact, even Justin Smith told the RCMP in the documents that Bradley Wong had went and told him something that Bradley Wong did not tell RCMP, which was that he had seen Daniel's car. He knew it was Daniel. He didn't tell that to RCMP. He just said that he hadn't heard a vehicle. But what he told to Justin Smith was almost like he was trying to convince Justin into telling law enforcement that he had heard or saw Daniel's vehicle, so that the blame or the look can be in that direction. Now, when all this comes out into the media, RCMP goes to the back of Daniel to defend, not to those two witnesses. They disputed, and that was the term that the news media used when they got two separate emails immediately after they broke the story on Daniel supposedly driving his car around. The RCMP contacted the media immediately and said that it was not true. They found no evidence of it. And a lot of people want to believe these two guys just because their story aligns with what they believe in and not necessarily with what the facts are or what the evidence points to. And so Mr., whoever, for those that want to talk about, oh, I see red flags, I see lies, I see this. Why don't we look in that direction too and say, why are these two guys lying about certain things? Why are they involving themselves in the case? Why are they bringing up things that are not true, to the point RCMP goes to the back, to defend Daniel's back? But when people start looking at Mr. Wong's history and his history of drug use himself, having been arrested, which Daniel hasn't been arrested for being a thief or a drug user, but Bradley Wong has. He has an extensive history. Why is he lying? Why is he involving himself in the case? And when his history and when his name gets out there and people are looking at him as a possible suspect, why isn't RCMP going to his defense like they did for Daniel and Malaya? Those are the questions people should be asking themselves, not some of these other ones. You know what I mean? When it comes to deception. So for those that look at me as saying that, hey, I may not be able to tell deception or something of that nature, those were some pretty big red flags. KDP 11, Daniel does look at all sides and is fair. I appreciate that. That's what I try to do. And if something that Daniel says is inaccurate, or if it comes out, like I said, that I feel he's not being forthcoming with, I've come out and told you guys about it. I didn't hide it. I didn't sit on it, because I don't do this for Daniel or Malaya. I mean, hell, even Daniel's friend who can't talk to me, he got all upset. He got upset with me because he thought I was going to air some of the stuff that we had spoken about. He didn't do anything. This was one of his friends. And, even though he got upset and got rude and disrespectful, I didn't turn around and say, oh, I think he did something just because he don't like me. Similar to Mr. Wong, I have my suspicions about him, but I'm not ready to go out there and call him a child killer or anything like that. Nowhere near that. Law enforcement probably are well aware of him given his criminal history, and I would struggle to find him to have a difficult time to prove that he had committed a crime, if he in fact committed this crime, if there was a crime that was committed like that. I don't see Mr. Wong being the criminal mastermind that people look, I guess, at Daniel and see, because I don't see that either. And that's one of the other things that I was talking with Daniel about. And he was like, man, as intelligent as I think I am, and this was him saying it, I don't think he said, I don't think I can outsmart major crimes out of New Brunswick, out of eastern part of Canada, western. I think he mentioned like 4 or 5 different major crime units that are investigating the case and are looking at him. And he's like, apparently he's outsmarted them all. I don't think so. Kids that are on the loose, putting on their shoes. I'm not sure where that goes. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Like I said, I'm just trying to be fair. And at the end of the day, it's for Jack and Lilly, for reals. I'm not here to point blame, because, if Jack and Lilly did wander off and their parents really didn't do anything, which I mean, the boot prints kind of point to that direction. Do you think pointing at their parents and putting them through hell for something that they didn't do is something they would have wanted? Do you think that they would appreciate people putting their name on something like that? Like, oh, we're doing this for them, when that may not have been what happened? I don't. Have you ever heard a parent toughing kid out of a vehicle and said, walk from EG pipeline distance? I have. My parents did it. Yeah, but I mean, even like, so we would have to believe that if that were the case and they caused the disappearance based on tough love, don't you think they would have failed that lie detector test? Plus, you also have certain things like, one, these kids were like 4 and 6, super young. And 2, they were able to rule out Daniel being back and forth on that road because there are cameras on the road. Now, the cameras don't show specifically Daniel's house, but what they do show is on either side of his house. And at night, which may 6 o'clock or 1 o'clock. Well, even when Bradley Wong says that he supposedly saw this car, he said he saw the car and the lights through the trees, right? So he's not like he's saying he saw the car with the headlights off. Well, you would expect you can see at nighttime headlights in a distance a lot further than you could see a car. And if there's a vehicle that is off of the field of view, but the lights are directed in a direction towards the field of view, you can see the lights through the trees or shine up against the tree that you wouldn't see the car, right? During the Brian Koberger case, we were trying to figure out where he parked, and I was able to deduce that he parked on the side of the house based on the fact that when he came around the back of the apartment complex that was next to the victim's house, you can see the shine of his headlights on the houses that were in the foreground or in the background further off to the in front of the house. And why this was important, or how we were able to deduce this, was the camera was facing away from the victim's home. So had Brian Koberger driven there during the day, we would not have seen the light shine on the houses in the background or in the distance from the camera. And what makes this important is we have 4 passes, which gives us 3 examples of him just driving by and not parking back there. And parking back there was a parking lot behind the house of the victim. And some people had, and including law enforcement, had thought that there was a good possibility that that's where Brian Koberger parked. However, had he parked there, then the lights that were shining on the houses would have behaved differently than the other passes when he didn't park back there. So because they behaved exactly the same was an indication that he didn't park there, and he most likely parked on the side. And the reason why we can say that is because had he turned onto the street in where the victim's front of the house was facing, that's also would have been captured. The headlights would have been captured in front of those houses on that street, which the camera would have captured. So because the camera did not capture any headlights facing for a significant period of time, it meant that the vehicle was facing or parked facing a direction where the headlights were not going to be captured on camera. And again, had he done this during the day, none of this would have been seen. And so when you have somebody like Bradley Wong saying at night he's seeing these lights and car driving, blah, 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 well, it's very simple to go in there and look at these cameras that maybe aren't directly facing at Daniel's house, but that you can see whether or not a vehicle is moving based off of the light shine on the trees in the distance. So, easy way of figuring things out, so to speak. If Jack and Lilly had tablets/phones, they might have been evidence of their presence in the morning of the disappearance, the way of a router or internet logs. I don't know if they had any or not, but I do know that Malaya said that she turned on the TV. Right. So that'll give us an idea also of a timeline. Then you have also Janie making a phone call outside to Ron. So a couple of things. Kids in the USA taken while parents sleep. Elizabeth Smart, Jessica Lunsford, Polly Claus taken out of their beds while parents were asleep. I'm not too familiar. So MCM, I don't think you understand what I'm saying here, though. I've not said that Daniel's not lying. I've said that he has. My thing is like, have you ever seen, like, for instance, dark clouds and it not rain, right? So in the Brian Koberger case, and I'll finish it this will be the last thing I say. So in the Brian Koberger case, I used to say it didn't take much for me to go outside, see dark clouds leaving, water on the ground, and everything wet around me for me to determine that it rained. I can look at the evidence and say that it rained. I don't need the weatherman to tell me. In this scenario here with Jack and Lilly, it's the opposite. You have dark clouds, which would be your red flags, but there's no water on the ground. You check up the weatherman and you look at the past, and the weatherman says that no water hit the ground. And so in this scenario, The clouds would be the red flags. The water would be the action. And the weathermen would be the law enforcement agency that's coming out forward. So it's one thing to see the dark clouds. It's another thing to point out the water on the ground. Show me the water. Show me the evidence that they actually did something. You know what I'm saying? And no, I'm not. And like I've said multiple times throughout this entire episode, is that Daniel has seemed to become, has said certain things that weren't completely true, in my opinion. Now, I'm not the one investigating him. I don't have access to what law enforcement and RCMP do. He could very well be telling me the truth. I don't buy some of the things he said, but that's just my opinion. All right. But I have not at one point or at any point said that Daniel and Janie were 100% honest or accurate. In fact, I have come out to say multiple times that for those people that don't like Daniel or think that he's lying or any of these other things, that I probably agree with you more than you think. It's just I don't agree with the big picture one or the final picture one, with the fact that he did something nefarious. All right. I think that there's boot prints that are out there in the middle of nowhere that it seems like you may be discrediting, that you're not looking at and saying that they mean something, because at the end of the day, it is impossible for Daniel to have done something on Thursday night and those boot prints happened the next day. It just is. It's impossible for those kids to have died in that house and then for them to step on the pipeline. It just is. It says this. Those are the facts. Those are the parts of the investigation that I look for. Right? Yeah, there could be red flags. Everybody has skeletons in their closet. I'm sure if I go through yours, we're going to find some things that may not make you look in the right light. And then I could come up with some random accusations, and people are going to look at your skeletons and say, oh, well, there's skeletons here, so this must mean that these wild accusations are true. Now, here in this scenario, it's a little bit different because there are some kids missing. But the same thing applies. In every scenario, there's, whether they're family. I mean, let's look at the Idaho case. People were starting to look at the victims' family members as reasons why those kids' lives were taken, for no other reason other than the fact that they had something in their past. Whether Steve Gonsalves had a brother that got arrested, or Xana Kernodle's mom had some issues with legal problems. Maddie's dad had some issues legally. So all these things that they had, all these red flags or all these things with no evidence whatsoever, people pointed in their direction. For those that are looking at Daniel based on these other things, you're no better than those people that are pointing at Christy, Steve, Maddie Mogan's dad, Xana Kernodle's folks. You're no better than those people who are pointing at those folks just simply because they have some red flags in their history or in their past. Now, if there's evidence to tie it in, that's a different story, right? But there's zero there. Freaking RCMP has already come forward and said we did multiple interrogations. We looked at their backgrounds. We looked at their financial records. We looked at their phone history, look at their GPS locations, and they took and passed polygraph tests. Right now, imagine, if they didn't do any of those things, and then I'd say you got something to stand on. If we're like, man, we're still waiting on the lie detector test, or we're still waiting on this, we're still waiting on that, I'd get it. I'd get people's opinions and situations based off of that. But in this scenario, those things aren't pending anymore. Those things have been investigated. And so at this point, I mean, Daniel and Malaya, are they mother and father of the year? Hell no. But not by a long shot. But did they cause the disappearance of their kids? Based on RCMP and what they put out there, I don't think so. And if you think that because you feel that their living conditions isn't as good as yours for whatever reason, or whatever the case may be, that they're horrible parents and they deserve this, and that that you might be wrong, but it's okay that you're wrong and blaming them still because of the words that they have said or the stuff that they have done. That's bullcrap. That's bullcrap. You're not God. You're not no judge to judge other people. Like that's one of the things that I've heard also is like I've heard some of these creators that attack them like, well, if I'm wrong and they actually had nothing to do with it, well, I'm justified in saying that these people were child killers without any evidence because I have a weird perception of what they said and I don't understand. That's not for me. That's not for me. That's not how I roll. I follow the evidence. I follow logic, truth, and evidence. If you got red flags, you got dark clouds, that's fine. Show me the water. Show me the facts. What do you have? Where's the blood? Where's the DNA? Where's a lot of things? Where's RCMP coming out saying that this guy's not cooperating? Where's the lawyer who's telling him not to cooperate? Where's the failed polygraph test? Where is the mysterious stuff on his phone that shows that he was manipulating his phone in one way or another? Show me the Mike Tomlin, coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, says, show me the baby. I don't want to hear about the labor pains. I don't want to hear about the complaints. Show me the baby. I don't want to hear about the labor complaints. I don't want to know about the labor pains. Just show me the baby. Same thing here. I don't want to hear about the labor pains. Show me the baby. Where's the evidence? Where's the water? Where's the red? I get the red flags. Where's the evidence? If you don't got it, then you don't got it. All righty, guys. Well, I appreciate everybody here. Please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. Ring that notification bell. I'll be back on tomorrow night. I'm going to be with Dr. Vona. We're going to actually be talking about a new case. Anna Kempler, I want to say is her name. She's the young lady that disappeared on a yacht or was murdered on a yacht, on a cruise. I'm sorry. A lot of suspicion there with the stepbrother. I don't know much about that case. Dr. Vona has been having a lot of success investigating that case. And so she's going to bring me on. We're going to talk a little bit about it and give my 2 cents. To me, I really haven't covered it too much because it seems like it's pretty obvious that the stepbrother did something. There's not a lot of mystery there or some, things that are left for interpretation. But I'm open to a new case. So tomorrow night, myself and Dr. Vona are going to be talking about it. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You guys know what to do. Thank you, Crochet. We appreciate you so much coming in with $9.99 super sticker. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. I'll be back on. I think it was about 8 p.m. Central. So we'll see you guys. Or 7:30 p.m. Central, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. I'll be here tomorrow night. See y'all then. Peace out.